My passion has always been, how can I get a client to behave in such a way that they experience the benefits of not only the workout, but the benefits from teaching themselves how to behave in a situation they don't necessarily want to be in. Great athletes have a flexibility of attention that normal people don't have. One of the issues that people have typically had with strength training is how to talk to themselves psychologically to get over these hurdles they have about facing this and that. That's not how you go about it. You don't talk to yourself more. You pay attention to something different that won't even have your brain going there in the first place. You're not going to do it automatically. It's a skill you have to develop. It's a skill that we're integrating with your learning of the exercise.
Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, your one-stop shop for growing your business and fueling your passion for high-intensity training. This is episode 466. Before we dive into today's episode, grab your free PDF playbook, Referral Machine, 4-step referral blueprint for high-intensity training businesses. Download now at highintensitybusiness.com/ref. That's REF, short for referrals. You'll also get a full-length video training with Luke Carlson on the best proven practices for driving referrals. Go to highintensitybusiness.com/ref. That's REF. It's kind of ironic because Al and I were just talking about the power of lead magnets to capture emails. And I said, you got to give away something valuable. And this is very valuable, as I've actually updated it a few times. And it's just some great tips on how to drive more referrals and get more clients in your business right now. Today's guest, obviously, is Al Coleman. Really excited to have you back, Al. Quick bio. So Al Coleman became interested in strength exercise in high school to improve his performance as a baseball player. A few years later, in 1999, Al passed a super slow exercise specialist certification. One second. He then spent 10 years under the tutelage of master instructor Rob Serrano and honed his craft. From 2010 to 2019, Al worked for Renex Overload Fitness, where he served as director of education, working in close concert of Ken Hutchins, Josh Trentine, and Gus Diamantopoulos in refining the Renex protocol. Many of you know Al has been on the podcast a couple of times. He's been kind enough to contribute some great stuff to the membership, some great technical advice as it relates to training and running your HIIT operation. Many of us Al, you're I would say quite coveted in a lot of the among a lot in the HIIT industry, because people really do enjoy learning from you and appreciate you. Obviously, come on the podcast to share all your skills. So welcome back to the podcast. Good to see you.
Well, thank you for having me, Lawrence. I look back at my couple of like we said, my previous podcasts, and wasn't happy with some of the things that I kind of covered in the past, or not the information so much, but the way I covered it and explained it. And I'm happy to have me back on here because as I fumbled around over the last few years, trying to because I do realize when I look at my social media and the things I put out there, some of it seems a little bit nebulous, difficult to understand at times. And so I'm excited because as I've, last year we closed our business and we moved down to Wilmington, North Carolina, to the beach. And I've moved equipment in my home and building a home business here along with my online platform and the book that I'm writing. But, I'm talking to a completely different crowd these days about, what it is I'm trying to do. And as I work with, people in this industry who are trying to kind of coach me on my poor business skills, I'm realizing I'm sometimes not direct enough with my message, I guess. And, one of the things that I kind of wanted to kind of lead off with for viewers is, listeners, that I think, the way I approach things, and if I have been coveted as a trainer, it's because I do consider myself a craftsman. Like my training has been my craft. It's all I know how to do. I laugh and tell people I'm, 45, I'll be 46 in a month, and I'm unemployed because I've only ever done this one thing. Right. And it's been my passion. And so my passion has always been, how can I get a client to behave in such a way that they experience the benefits of not only the workout, but the benefits from teaching themselves how to behave in a situation they don't necessarily want to be in. And I think there's a lot of valuable.
That's like the $1 million
transferability.
question, isn't it? For I think a
Yeah.
lot of our listeners and people in here trying to get clients to get the most out of their workouts, especially the intensity avoiders.
Well, absolutely. So, this will be, I think, particularly interesting to listeners. Well, I did become obsessed in strength exercise at about 13, but my real love was baseball since I was 6.
Yep.
And when I was 10 years old, I read the autobiography of Sadahiro, who is the world leader in lifetime home runs. He was a Japanese player in the 70s. His autobiography was named A Zen Way of Baseball. And what I was so impressed with was that, unlike many other athletes, I mean, most athletes do treat their sport this way, but he treated it differently. He treated hitting and he treated the different skills of the sport of baseball like they were a martial art. He went to see a Rinzai Zen master and swordsman and learned the art of using the sword and all of these things. And, people might laugh at that and say, like, athletes do all these crazy sport specific training things. And that book gave me some insight into why there's a big misunderstanding with people in that. Those are arts of attention. And that's what those things are teaching. And great athletes have a flexibility of attention that normal people don't have. And that is developed through martial art or anything that is treated like a skillful martial art. I was so impressed by his devotion to that craft that I just, I wanted to be like that. So as I got older and I started reading about strength training, it was the same thing. My first obsession was like, all right, how do I master the skills of this so that I can become a robot? And even later on, and this is where I think I'll connect with a lot of the thing that got me obsessed with super slow. In 1997, I was visiting a Borders bookstore in Baltimore, Maryland, while visiting my brother at college. And, I'd read a lot of HIIT stuff at this point. I got a certification when I was 16 in high intensity training from the National Strength Professionals Association, which is, I was familiar with the HIIT stuff. I was in this bookstore and I see this really odd looking white book that, on the shelf that just obviously didn't belong next to everything published by McGraw-Hill and Harper, and these glossy, colorful covers. This is really bland looking manual. I pulled it out, flipped through it, and it was all Nautilus related material. So I bought it and I went home and I read it 3 times over the next 4 days. I absorbed it, but the thing that really caught me, there's a story in here. Now I might pull it up because I know it so well at this point, but it's a story, and people are going to think this is a little silly, but this is the story that's kind of driven me. There is a story of a guy named Juan Hostios and another woman named Lori Ford. These were examples of what Ken Hutchins called the alpha subjects. These are examples of people who had mastered the behavioral aspects of the protocol to such a degree that they were unstoppable during the exercise. They would just, and one example was silly, like, this guy, Juan, did 2 exercises a week, a leg press and a chin up, and afterwards lay on the floor for 2 hours, twitching like a frog.
Hang on, after doing one exercise, after 2. Hang on, two in one workout.
Yeah, 2 in 1 workout.
Once a week, and he would lie on the floor for 2 hours.
You lie on the floor for 2 hours, twitching like a frog injected with strychnine. That's Ken's words. Now, it's a silly example, and you never want to try to push a client there. And I think a lot of well-intended people in the HIIT community in the past had seen stuff like that with like Ken Leisner and people puking, and there's this badge of badge of honor comes across, and that's silly. I never took it like that. Like, I never took that type of behavior as being an absolute requirement for progress. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people do. And I think a lot of people have looked at HIIT and said, and even clients, when trainers, I think, don't present it well, a client might come in and go, oh man, you're going to ask me to work that hard. And even in the manual with the alpha subject, he says that typical clients shouldn't watch people train that intensely. They might become scared. And it's true.
Yeah, I'd agree with
but to promote that level of intensity is a requirement for progress is ridiculous. I would never think that. However, the thing that grabbed me about it was that these people taught themselves a behavior that allowed for that, period.
Mm.
And my entire objective from there on out became, how do I communicate to a client to get them on this path? I don't expect perfection. I don't, because it's a utopia, being by definition, it doesn't exist. It's an ideal we're aiming for. They're going this way. We're using this as a model, not saying you have to get there. But if that was something
humans would hate utopia.
Exactly. Humans would hate utopia, right?
No problems to solve.
No, and we wouldn't want to live forever either, like we think, right? So it's the interesting thing about that story to me was the behaviors listed as ideal in the manual. These people somehow mastered, and as a result, they reached this endpoint as close to this endpoint as could be reached with this ideal. And again, it's an extreme end of the continuum, and it's not necessary for the physical progress that most people want.
Yeah.
I didn't take it like that. I took it as those two people treated their training like a martial art. They did the exercises for the sake of the workout. They said, I know I'm going to get stronger. And that's what I like to tell people a lot. Strength training, we know the side effects. You can do it terribly or you can do it well, and you're going to get pretty much the same side effects. But given that's the fact, why wouldn't you choose to do it a little bit better?
Yeah, totally.
When you could garner more out of it. And not only that, when you treat, and this is where we'll get into, but when you treat something like the skill it becomes more enjoyable over time. It becomes something that people cultivate instead of something that they're looking at their weekly schedule and going, oh, God, I can get my workout in. And here's my scheduled time. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but
yeah, just Al, just one thing. Sure. I wanted to just rephrase. You said earlier about how, most people don't want to see someone pushing really, really freaking hard, like high intensity might scare people off. I think there's some nuance to that. It depends on, like, looking at it from a business perspective, it depends on the target market, I think, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you've got like a type A driven, busy professional guy or girl who wants to work out all the time, wants to work out hard, wants to be pushed, they're actually maybe going to be like magnetized by that type of Whereas if your target market is seniors who've never even stepped foot into a gym and are really intimidated, might have the complete opposite effect. I'm being a bit mean on seniors there, but I think generally that might be accurate. But just people that are generally uncomfortable going to the gym and that type of thing. So just wanted to make that clarify there. Do you mind? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off your flow there, but I do want to get into your, the manifesto that you sent me, the book notes, and get into. Because I think you set this up really well, basically talking about the importance of getting behavior right. So if that's okay, I just wanted to let you know. Obviously, I read the notes you sent me for the first half of the book. I thought it was fascinating. I made notes. I'm really excited to get into this. Some of it you've touched on a little bit already. But I think you might be onto something with this. And I just want to say I'm excited to explore it. But go on,
I just wanted to kind of really quickly again for context, and I think this will help. One thing that I haven't talked about in the past a lot with people is that I do have and I think this provides valuable context and an understanding. So I have a 20-year history of Zen Buddhist meditation practice. It's been something I've seriously devoted and studied. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that is biased and influenced the way that I think, and the way that I view exercise science and training and all of these things. So that background, the insights I've derived from that practice are influencing everything that I say. So I'd kind of like to make that clear. And it kind of took a while for me to want to say that, because again, like I was telling you before this, 20 years ago, if you meditated, people thought you were some new age hippie, and, it's non-scientific. The moment you said meditation to maybe somebody in the HIT community, they stopped listening to you,
Right.
cause you're not objective anymore, and, all this stuff. And so I was hesitant for a long time, but now everybody knows, like brushing your teeth, it's something you should be doing. But I'd just like to specifically say I am part of a Zen Buddhist tradition, and I in no way wish to express that what I'm about to say is reflective of that tradition. It's a deep tradition with a lot of insights that go beyond just our typical self-help motivational things. And I don't want to diminish it. But meditation and the practice of it and what it means is a huge part of the Metronome Method and automated muscle, and not the separate practice of meditation. Don't get me wrong. How my insights from that relate to the way I instruct people.
So it sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving us heads up
Sure.
on that. I mean, that's totally fine. So let's get into what you've been working on, right? The Metronome Method. Explain to don't need to necessarily keep it succinct, but just be mindful. Obviously, we want to cover quite a lot.
Yeah.
So just give it to us. What is the Metronome Method?
So basically, the Metronome Method is, on the surface, it sounds like I'm using a metronome, obviously, a musical metronome. And that might not sound like a big deal. I mean, HIT instructors I've known for ages have used a metronome. Many do. I probably in 2013, when I was with Renex and we were working on the Rep Builder. Jeffrey Mule, as a project was the Rep Builder, is a kind of a pacing software. And as I was looking into that, I was looking into other forms of because I felt the pacing, there was this connection with people's ability to maintain kind of automated and rhythmic movement. Was a big thing that I wanted to see based on just my concept of what a continuous tension repetition means. I was looking to cultivate more continuity and smoothness in people's movement. And one of the things I explored was a program that was made for kids with learning disabilities, called Interactive Metronome. And then I started getting into it, and there was a lot of research showing that using a musical metronome and rhythmic stuff helps cognitive processing and people learn physical skills. And this made sense to me because when I was a pitcher, I'd put a metronome on. And if I wanted to throw harder, I didn't muscle up and try to throw the ball harder. I'd turn the pace of the metronome up to increase the rhythm I was moving.
Which would sound like what, like beep, 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 like it would just be beeping, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
For those that aren't familiar, like including myself to a degree, I haven't used one before.
Yeah, and so most people will use the metronome, I think with HIT anyways. You'll hear it put it like 60 beats a minute and a 1/4 time signature, and you'll just hear it go 1. You'll just do that over and over and over again, right? Mm-hmm. But musically, you use it different when you're learning guitar and things like that. And you can change the time signatures, and that's what I've always done, meaning like I will have a certain number of beats before I hear a change in tone, and that gives me a timing aspect to it. So I always use that for throwing a ball. I realized early on that, one of the paradoxes is that if you're trying to accelerate a limb, if you try to do so with a lot of muscular force, it won't go well. Acceleration requires a smooth transfer of kinetic energy up the kinetic chain, which means there's a relaxation and a sequence contraction of things. But if you tense, you screw that order of sequencing. Right. Now, metronome helps with that, and that sequencing part is a big part of the metronome method. So I've always used the metronome for throwing and other things. And I found out more about this kind of neuroscience research about how auditory technology helps people with their cognitive processing and their physical skill. And I started screwing around using a metronome with my clients. And this is, I'll say this, this probably really got serious during my post super slow days, I should say, meaning somewhere around 2018, 2019, as I got deeper into the study of motor learning, I realized in a lot of ways that the extremely slow speed repetitions are in a way, creating skill retardation. It's while it is possible to become so skilled that you can move very smoothly 10 seconds up and 10 seconds down, that it's still working against your body's motor programming and what it's trying to do. I just started to see that for the vast majority of people, 10 seconds was too long of a period of time to create a smooth sequence of transfer up the kinetic chain out into the movement arm in order to keep the movement smooth. 10 seconds was too long and allowed too much interruptions in that time period. And as we know with motor learning and just muscle physiology, if the neural input gets more frequent and sequence gets better and better, things get faster and they get smoother, right? So slow becomes smooth, smooth becomes fast, always. So slow movement's important to teach people in the beginning, so they don't understand they don't just heave or jerk against the load. But thereafter, you should be smoothly trying to increase your speed, not abruptly, smoothly. Otherwise, you're holding back the muscular effort you're producing. I mean, it's just
Interesting.
And that's another insight I came up when using the metronome when I used to throw. So I'd set it for a certain time and I'd throw, and I'd notice within 5 throws, I was exceeding the timing I had set, meaning my body is speeding up naturally. And so I'd have to keep increasing pace of the metronome and my body get used to that. And then all of a sudden I would be outpacing it. And then I'd have to, so the point is your body, as sequencing gets better, neural input gets better, things want to speed up. Right. And so if you're late in an exercise and you see somebody shaking back and forth and, they're bracing really hard and they're still moving slowly, if they pushed a little bit harder, that shaking would start smoothing out, just like it would like in a Parkinson's patient. They walk in a very spark plug type fashion, but if you ask them to run, they smooth out.
Interesting. I know that.
So the metronome method was basically kind of developed for me working with clients and starting to see, I asked the question, I go, what's the speed of motion that if I just put it on in the background, didn't tell anybody what I was doing, gave them no information, and they just started working out, I like to see at what speed most people just kind of naturally sync up. Because that could tell us a few things. But mainly, what I was seeing was, after things didn't really start getting sequenced and smooth in the way that I envisioned until I got somebody below about 5 seconds, 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down. And I've kind of found 3 seconds and 5 seconds the sweet spot for most exercises. Anything faster is a little out of control for most people. Mm-hmm. But one of the creepy things that I started, I'm not saying this is an ideal speed of motion, I'm not claiming that at all. But 2 years ago, when I had my studio, I had 3 instructors and I had a metronome going 4/4. So what would happen is you hear 3 talks, and on the 4th, it would be a tone change. All right. And I had everybody moving at 4/4, mm-hmm. and the instructors were telling people to move at 4/4. I didn't even tell them what I was doing. I went into the studio and I switched the metronome 3/3 just to screw around with it and see what happened.
Yeah.
And I stood back and I watched, and the creepiest thing happened within 2 minutes. All 3 clients training in the studio at the same time were turning around and doing the same phase of the repetition all at the same time in sync. It was weird, to say the least. And so I started screwing around with that speed more and more. And all I was doing was asking people to, instead of having a preconceived idea of where they're physically supposed to change direction, I'd like them to get good at smoothly changing direction when they hear the tone change. So what this basically did was tell somebody, okay, I'm pushing and I'm just going this way until somebody taps me back the other way. And I get to the bottom and then I hear this tone and it taps me back the other way. And for the first time in my 25-year career as a trainer, it was amazing. I started getting responses when I was training people. And we could get into this too, because I know one of the popular notions is that, your verbiage and your instruction and what you're saying to the client is what grabs them and keeps them. I have a different opinion on that, and I'll explain why. And it comes from an attention science standpoint. But what I started noticing when I was training people with the metronome and they were starting to sync up their turns, and I said, I just want you to, like a cat watching a mouse hole, listen for that chime. And the moment you hear it, see how smooth you can change direction. And without fail, for most people, within 3 or 4 repetitions, they look like a freaking robot. And as they started to fatigue, not only were they keeping sync, they weren't doing the typical outroading behaviors that I was seeing with, I guess, non-metronome cue.
So outroading meaning form collapsing and people taking tension off the muscle and that kind of target muscle.
We're going around and because the metronome tone quite naturally, without thinking about it, intuitively is telling the person, you don't have time to do any of that shit. You got to get to me. Like you got to get on your horse. You don't have time to futz around and readjust your big left toe, cause it's itching right now. Like you have to push. And so it was creepy. A lot of the behavioral things I'd spent 25 years trying to over verbalize and correct during the workout. And I can tell you, and most instructors can tell, experienced instructors can tell you, sometimes training a client is like trying to cover holes in a waterbed. You fix one thing and during a repetition and they do something else. And instruction can become a complete mess. Well, what I started noticing when people were getting really skilled at staying pace with the metronome, I had clients when I was constructing look at me and say, can you please stop talking? I'm trying to concentrate. That was the best day of my life, because that is what I've always striven for. Why? Because I just know from an attention standpoint, although verbiage helps people, it's helping the wrong thing. It's certainly helping people push themselves and get more physically out of it. But it's like trying to be calm during a panicking situation instead of teaching the person, how do you focus in the first place so you don't even go there?
So this is obviously a huge claim, right? Because a lot of our colleagues will put a lot of emphasis on the coaching and the specific verbiage, the specific techniques, like specific corrective feedback, all of that. But are you suggesting that with, you wrote here in the book notes, with a metronome method, an audible cue for a foolproof workout. Now, are you saying there's no place for any talk and it's just the metronome, or as long as they know there is still, there's still a place for coaching, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. No, your instructing still matters. And I'll get into that another way. Now, a lot of the other motor.
So be mindful of time now, because we're running up to, we've got like 30 minutes here. So we want to get into the specifics.
Absolutely. So, a lot of the motor learning science with regards to cueing shows that what you say and what you're asking the person to pay attention to is critical. So what you do say matters, right? But those are more setup things. Those are things to set the person correctly. And during the middle of an exercise, you still need to say the right thing at the right time. But for the most part, you've taught them how to pay attention. And by a number of other things I do before the metronome, that's part of the metronome method, sets that up. But for now, and we'll get into that when I talk about the primary postural task and the super postural task. But
we should try and get into that very soon, I think.
yeah, absolutely. So what I'm, and this is a good segue into it, but what I'm claiming is that there are fundamental set of attentional skills that you can teach a client that makes your role different. It doesn't make you a cheerleader, and it doesn't make you, a bedside nurse trying to keep you calm as you're having a panic attack. It's okay. We all know that this is hard. We all know this is difficult, and we all know that you all have things on your mind that have nothing to do with exercise, and that this is not the most important thing in your life. But you're here for 30 minutes, and you're paying me a lot of money. And I'm telling you, there's a couple of very easy things you can learn that will snap you at the beginning of the workout into the mode that you need to be in to walk out of here leaving like you left nothing on the table. And now, I truly believe this, if that happens, the relationship to whatever issue they had coming in there will be different. So I think that the way we train people has a more global effect on their character in general, and them as, how they're able to respond to stress. And we know this now, right? Wim Hof is super popular for cold exposure. We know exposing you to hermetic stresses makes you more resilient. In the same way, strength training is so intense that it requires a certain set of attentional skills in order to extract what you're trying to, so that you don't get in your own way. But the development of those skills are universal and apply to everything, really. So it's I've just kind of found a way to take meditation practice and integrate it and the exercise instruction without ever mentioning meditation.
Yeah. Just one thing, and just on what you're pointing there about, that we get, the more we expose ourselves to stresses, the better we get at tolerating them. There's actually quite good research, I believe, in exercise to show that when you expose yourself to, I can't remember if it's exactly strength training, might be. But the idea being that obviously when you expose yourself to multiple bouts of strength training or exercise, that you actually tolerate it better, which makes a lot of sense, right?
Yes.
I'd tell you what I'd like to do. I've highlighted some bits from, because I feel like, it might be better for people to learn more about, the Metronome Method when they go to your website or Instagram, which we'll make sure we put on the blog post and plug at the end. I just want to go through some of the things that really stood out to me that I think are very interesting and just hear your thoughts. And this might be sequential, and it may mean that we end up covering the hows, whys, etc. But it's something you said in the intro is about the Metronome Method and I thought this was very interesting. You thought the whole point of it is to basically produce optimal focus, physical output, and safety. Like that to me is like the optimal workout. That's what we want, right? Optimal exercise. And to transform your workout into a martial art that you'll fall in love with. And just to tag on the end of that, immense in essence, alleviate is, I'm paraphrasing, I said alleviate, immense physical discomfort and psychological resilience. And then you said immense physical discomfort and psychological resilience required. This need not be the case using the Metronome Method. Using was my own word, but that's effectively what you're saying, which is like, whoa, right? Because I think many people who are listening to this, they have clients, like I was saying at the start of this podcast, who really don't enjoy their workouts at all. They maybe don't have productive workouts because they really can't tolerate the discomfort. But you're saying that this method may help people overcome the physical discomfort and the resiliency required. It just won't even be a factor. Can you explain to me exactly why that is? Why does the Metronome Method do that with people, in your opinion?
Well, it starts with, at a surface level, the metronome itself, if somebody's taught to pay attention to it, it becomes very rhythmic. As a result, it's kind of hypnotizing. I want one of the, my wife, when I put her through workouts at home here, and she's gotten, 2-3 repetitions into the set, and then she looks like a robot. She gets off and she's like, man, I felt like I was in a zone. I go, that's exactly what you should feel like on every exercise. And people think that the mystical state. It's not. If you if you physically behave in certain ways and pay attention to certain things, it's a given. It's not a mystical state. And it's not even that hard of a skill to develop. It's rather, am I paying attention to this versus this? And when my attention strays from what it's supposed to be on, I have to get good at coming back. Because what neuroscience is now showing is our former model of the brain is wrong. We used to think of the brain as an executor, central command system, sending signals down to everything else and making it work. So everything else is working for the brain. But a new model of neuroscience is showing that now really on a cellular level, each cell in the body has a different function, and they're all coalescing at the same time to respond to an environmental stressor. So it's more of a bottoms up self-organization model of the way the human brain works. We don't really choose our actions. Our actions are chosen for us by environmental constraints, right? And so, one of the issues that people have typically had with strength training is how to talk to themselves psychologically to get over these like hurdles they have about facing this and that. And what I'm trying to say is that's not how you go about it. You don't talk to yourself more. You pay attention to something different that won't even have your brain going there in the first place. And yeah, you're not going to do it automatically. It's a skill you have to develop, but it's a skill that we're integrating with your learning of the exercise. And much the same, and in a lot of in my opinion, and the really kind of at the heart of the metronome method is I do want to reframe people's paradigm and understanding of the role exercise plays in their life. And what I mean by that is this martial art thing, right? We call things a workout, and I think that's a problem, right? A workout, when people think of a workout, they think of all the things that we're talking about: sweating, physical intensity, heavy breathing, discomfort. And some people, as we know, love that. And other people, as we know, hate that, right? So the trick is the trick as a client is, as a trainer is, how do I get my client to buy in enough that they can get past that to get some physical benefit from this? And then for the people who love it, we don't have to worry about them. They, those are our great clients, right? Well, again, those are psychological makeups that in a moment can be diverted just by what you're paying attention to. It's not, it's really like more a matter of, don't look here instead. Just turn your head that way a little bit and you'll be doing something completely different. So I don't say workout because the word workout again sets off this connotation of something that's physically intense. It's a necessary evil that most people have to include in their life, even though if they had their choice and there was a pill that they could take to get them in great shape, they would choose not to go through the stress of working out. All right. I think that's the reason the word workout's bad, because on any given day, a client can go, I know the physical benefit that I'm going to immediately get from the workout and what I'm going to feel afterwards. And sometimes I like that, and sometimes I'm really not up for that. So which one of them is going to show up that day? We don't know, right? And because it's a physical benefit that they're being told they get from the workout, they're just kind of believing that as long as they participate, they'll get the side effect, right? But that can only last for so long before, I think, because that type of training with people, even if they're coming in week after week and they're consistent and maybe they're showing some strength increases and they love it and they sing your praises. I've seen this. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've seen long-term clients after 10 years just be like, I don't really know if they don't put any more effort than they did into it the first year. And at some point they look at their pocketbook and they go, I don't know how much this is really helping me anymore. And this is how much I'm spending on it a month. And they look at it more like a bad habit that they have to cut out, because they've never really fully accepted what exercise is. And that's a skill like any other. You can't just enter it as a pill you're taking a couple times a week and, just barely participating. And you get some side effects. You will, some good ones for a while. but it won't keep you engaged for a lifetime. And that's my point
And what does
I
keep
hate the
people
word
engaged? Seeing it as a, like you say, as a practice,
as a
something,
practice.
as something to master and to pursue
Yeah.
mastery over a lifetime. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Exactly. And so the kickback I get on that is, well, nobody cares about this stuff as much as you do. And I go, yeah, I know that. I'm not asking
It's
them
true.
to do this. I'm
They're not
not
nobody.
asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I get it, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you as an instructor, there are ways you can set the workout, the environment, and the things that you say up so that for the time that they enter your door, they are practiced. They have a practicing mindset. And then they leave and they can do whatever they want, focus on whatever they want. But the point is, it's your dojo. And like any
Yes.
martial arts dojo, you go in and you do what the instructor says. And you don't get the martial art conformed to your physical needs. It's adaptable. You need to adapt things for sure. Any skilled trainer needs a huge tool set of things to adapt with the client. It's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, the practice in the martial art comes first, not because you think it's the right thing, not because you think it's more effective, but because it's a system. And it's a system, if they follow, will develop a particular mindset in the workout that will make your job easier and will make them fall in love with it. Because I don't know about you, but anybody who's ever practiced anything and gotten really good at it doesn't really quit ever. I mean, why would you? I'm
That's
going
a
to
good
throw
point.
a ball I'm going to throw a ball the rest of my life because I'm skilled at it and I love it.
Yeah, you're
Right.
making me think of some clients who, probably due to my own shortcomings, we weren't able to necessarily improve their form.
Yeah.
We tried all sorts of things, and there's one particular client that comes to mind. They didn't, and they did end up quitting. And
Yeah.
I had an exit interview with the individual, and you're right. There was an element of they just weren't enjoying it anymore, and that's because, to your point, they weren't getting any better at it. The weight was going up when it shouldn't have been
Mhm.
because the form wasn't really right. There's probably more that comes to mind if I really think about it, but it's one that comes to mind straight away there. Yeah.
So it winds up happening. I've seen it. I've certified trainers. I've, when I was working with Josh Trotini, I was the director of education there. So every trainer we brought in, I trained. And, the struggle that I've always seen with trainers, and when you're in your office talking and, after work and talking about clients, I hate to say it, but one of the fun things is to talk about some of the silly behaviors you see going on in the weight room and how some people respond. And it, the 20 something years that I was working with people daily, people are like, man, I just can't get this person to do this thing. And this person's been coming for like a year already. And as a trainer, they're still working on a behavior a year from now that like they mentioned in the beginning and that they have to repeat every time. And my point is that doesn't happen in a martial art. That doesn't happen in yoga. Like if somebody takes yoga practice seriously, I'm not talking about
Sure.
the westernized aerobic yoga thingy become popular, but these disciplines, they have an order. You learn the forms before you move on to the next forms. But as a result, you're getting the side effect that you entered into it for the whole time. And so what I ask people to do is I go, we know strength training is going to help you, even if it's bad. Okay. It's going to help you some. If it's bad, you might be increasing the bad side effect too. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to treat this like a skill because you're going to get the same side effect. Even if you do this poorly, we're going to treat this like a skill. So not only is it safe, you learn to enjoy it. And then you don't stop
Is that funny hearing yourself say that? Because,
yeah.
All the Arthur Jones sayings, if it's exercise done correctly, you shouldn't enjoy it. Or what, I can't remember the exact quote, but there's lots of that thrown around, so that kind of, you disagree with that quite now, it would seem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the exercise versus recreation argument's kind of been a big part of this for me, right?
Interesting.
Because I agree. Exercise isn't fun and our typical understanding of fun. It and Ken, agrees with the argument is valid, is that, people involve themselves in recreational things because of the enjoyment aspect of it. They enjoy doing the activity, and there's a side effect that is somewhat physical, but there's also lots of negative side effects to those things. But for whatever reason, that activity grabbed that person's attention, and they are paying attention to it in the same way that I'm describing strength training should be paid attention to. That's why they stick to it. And a lot of people will tell me, that's my meditation. And I don't agree with that. That's just talk for another time. But the point is that I've very rarely seen the average person find that same type of engagement in strength exercise. And what I'm saying is that's silly, because of its intensity is the perfect portal to teach you to get into that zone. Because there's a certain number of things that you have to pay attention to, or ship is going to sink really fast. You are almost jettisoned into that state of mind if you set yourself up correctly. So, this is more or less a psychological and behavioral approach, because I believe it's critical to the long-term effects that somebody gets out of strength exercise, not just the physical ones. But I do believe the psychological and lifestyle thing is important too.
Let's see if we can really break this down in some practical steps. So I think people kind of get, most people already knew what a metronome was ahead of listening to this. But I think they're starting to understand how you use it. You said, I just highlight a bit here. You said, pace is the trick. Why the metronome? And you put here 3-4 is the ideal time signature. Is that 3 seconds concentric, 4 seconds eccentric? Is that what that means? Oh, okay.
No, so that's a metronome setting. So there's time signatures on a metronome. So at 60 beats a minute, I put the time signature at 3-4. You'll hear talk, talk, chime, talk, talk, chime. You'll hear a different tone.
And that's the 4-4 basically. The chime is the turnaround part you talked about.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So the 4, you can ignore the numbers. Those are musical notations.
Okay.
That you don't need to understand. I just put that for people. You don't have to understand it. Just look at the metronome and set it to that.
All right. So the next bit,
so
I found quite
3-4 will be 3-3. Okay.
Got it. Okay. Cool.
It'll be, yeah.
So the next bit I found quite humorous. You said paying attention to the metronome in the suggested manner optimizes attention for everyone. No special snowflakes. This may be lost unless they have literal hearing loss. Now, I don't think we need to talk about the tiny percentage of people who have hearing loss. So that may need to be addressed at some point. Also, I wanted to know before we move on, that I noticed in your email that you tend to defer a lot of the exercise, like selection and how to perform an exercise to build a Simone. Is that correct? You see him as the gold standard, his like joint friendly fitness.
I do. Yeah, that's a big part of this actually. And I briefly discussed this with Bill, and I don't think I did a good job of explaining it. But I will admit to not really having followed Bill's work really closely over the years, because I was really mired and stuck in a lot of the strict, super slow stuff, and it was the most valuable experience in my life, and I'm grateful for all of this. I'm not diminishing any of it, but there's always this quest for the ideal resistance curve throughout a full range of motion, and a lot of the arguments that I was hearing when Bill's stuff first came out, it's like, oh yeah, well that doesn't apply to machines that are cammed to accommodate those 4 positions. So, the idea was, can the resistance curve of the cam accommodate these end ranges where the lever's for? Right. And so that was the quest, to go through the full range and apply an accommodating resistance. And, that's not what Bill was saying. And, he was saying basically and he's right. There's no point from a muscular loading standpoint to go through a full range, because during certain ranges, your leverage is so poor that muscle's not getting you out of position. So you're not doing any muscular work there. Now, the interesting thing is, when I started putting the metronome at 3-3, and I told them, I don't want you to predetermine where you're going to change direction. I want you to change direction when you hear the chime. And over time, let's say on the chest press, somebody's throughout the set, their range of motion was naturally falling into the ranges,
How interesting.
that Bill suggested. And the reason is easy. It's sequencing. If I go past these ranges, because the levers change, the order and sequence of muscular events that have to occur for me to get out of this position, to get back into a position of a favorable moment, interrupt the exercise continuity. That interrupts the tension level in a target muscle. So naturally, when you're trying to sync up a speed, your brain goes, oh, I'm not going to go to these poor ranges because I won't be able to keep up the pace. And so your brain naturally truncates the range to the effective moment on ranges, because from a sequencing standpoint, if your objective is to stay pace with these metronome chimes, your brain won't intuitively take you into these spots where that pace would get interrupted, which it would. If you try to do these metronome repetitions through a full range, you'll see it feels a little clunky at both ends. And then as you fatigue, you're going to have a very difficult time maintaining pace. Whereas, if you kind of stick to the congruent ranges that Bill mentions, the pace of movement becomes really consistent, really intuitive. And just like Bill has said, and this is a big part of the metronome method, and this goes right into the primary postural task and the super postural task. And Bill has put this differently. He puts in his book stabilization. And that's a functional training thing. And one of the flaws that I saw over the long period of time was, not that clients should ever do anything like a barbell deadlift or a squat or a bench press. But the point is, even with the best exercise machines in the world, you can train them, get them strong, and then get them off the machine and ask them to get into an athletic stance. And it's very poor. The point was, the average person has no understanding of how to organize their structure in order to stabilize it, to even first begin to do an exercise. And that's one of Bill's main points, is that you have to discern between what's moving and what should be still. All right. And I believe in the spirit of intensity being the most important thing. We think so much in terms of, I've got to trigger the stimulus. It's muscular. And if I'm doing an exercise for my bicep and it's getting hard and I'm starting to fail and I might not make it, wiggling around a little bit and, doing all this to get up to the top is worth it because I'm getting more out of the musculature. My argument is, once it gets to that point, you're doing a different exercise. You're not further inroading that muscle anymore. As a matter of fact, everything in your body is now firing out of sequence. And you are just fighting for dear life to hang in there in this unstable way. And I saw that year after year. People training slow speed does not correct form. It corrects speed. They just make slow speed. I saw some of the worst form ever with people moving 10-10. My friend Travis, who owns Pace Personal Training in LA, Hollywood, he's worked closely with me Travis and I worked together at Overload for years. And
oh yeah, I know this person. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a click for me then.
Yeah. So Travis, him and I talk a lot. He's employed what I've been working on and giving me feedback, and he says the same things about training his clients. It's just been much easier. But
is he using a metronome method?
He is.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
look, I just
where I was going with that.
It's all right. No, I just wanted to. What I think we should do, because we've only got about 5 minutes here, is let's touch on pre-programming assessments, because I think you've set up what the metronome method is, why. We'll go into pre-programming assessments, and then we'll do a part 2 to talk about the primary postural task and how to use the metronome, right? So split this into 2 parts. That's okay with you, yeah? So, so tell us what is pre-programming assessments, and why are we doing a disservice if we're not doing it prior to programming training? Yeah.
So, this is, again, this kind of just blends into what we were just talking about. One of the flaws I saw over the years is we We assumed as long as we put people in biomechanically correctly designed machines and that they did an exercise with a modicum of proficiency and strengthen those target muscles, that over time, their muscular imbalances would correct and their postural issues would go away. And that's just never is the issue. The average person comes into your studio with so many issues. I mean, most people have rounded forward shoulders, or what they call upper cross syndrome. And you put them on a Med-X chest press. And their body is like the letter C, and they're sitting here they're not doing anything resembling. So they're doing the exercise while they're just giving themselves shoulder impingement. It's not even at a slow speed. It's biomechanically out of sequence what they're doing. So pushing people through that is not helpful. It's ingraining their problem and making it worse over time. So I have found over time that it's important to do postural assessments. And it's something, I've learned from other forms of training is what you could term corrective exercise. And this isn't strengthening stabilizer muscles and things like that. All you have to ever understand is that in exercise, anything that's not the target muscle is a stabilizer. That's really the key here is, when you set yourself up in an exercise, it's the key to the Metronome Method. Everything from the pinky nail on your bottom toe to the top hair on your head should be, you should intend to keep it absolutely still until the exercise is done. It's impossible. I know that. But the point is, if that remains somebody's kind of background goal for the workout, that is an attentional cue. If I say stay, keep everything else still, now they've given themselves a reference point to discern what should be moving and what shouldn't. Mm-hmm. So if you provide the rule with somebody, the moment I see a breakdown here, we're done. Now, someone might go, you're going to jip my workout because you didn't push me very hard just because I couldn't keep my body still. I go, but no, I'm going to make you do it again now. And you're going to try to better that error by pushing a little bit further and harder without letting that collapse happen. And then within a few workouts, now they know how to produce a maximal amount of intensity because they've constrained themselves so well that they see a very clear aisle to go.
Yeah.
To.
So
right.
I just want to make sure we be a bit more specific on this. So what is the programming assessment protocol, right? When you're pre-programming assessment protocol, what does it look like? Can you give us like 3 steps? Because we need to wrap up like in 2 minutes. So let's just try and stay on the course here.
Sure. 3 steps. Typically I'll sit there and I'll look at them from the front side and the back, and I'll look if they have scapular winging or, a number of other things that I have a list of what I'm looking at. And then based on where I see their deficiencies, I have a number of tests that I'll do to check, their muscular imbalances. I really hate using that word. I just like to call it, I like postural deficiencies, like Bill uses. It's a good way to put it. Muscle imbalance is just repeated in my head. But, I'll look at somebody's in that way, and I will prescribe things for them to do when they're not seeing it. Because, many of these overtonic muscles that people have from poor posture, aren't going to be corrected with a 30-second stretch once or twice a week. It needs to be neurally reprogrammed. They have to kind of do those things enough that those imbalances get better.
Interesting.
And then, so I'll give them some corrective exercises to work on there. And with regards to things like, the postural assessment also tells me what pieces of equipment would be good to put somebody on and which wouldn't, which ones will exacerbate their issues, which ones will make them better. And a lot of these things also could be negated with really good constraining systems and machines, but that's very complicated and not very practical. I mean, if you had some way to push somebody's shoulder blades back into the pad and keep it there, exercise form would become relatively straightforward thing to teach in no time. But given that that's impossible, for the most part, somebody has to create a mental model of what would be as though they were constrained. This is another big part of the metronome method is one of the flaws I see in the exercise industry. And I know that there's a great book about this by Douglas Hofstadter, but we need literal information, scientific information to understand the whys of everything we do. But using that literal information to get us to do those things is counterproductive for the most part. We sink an analogy. Human beings, analogies click for people because what it does is it takes this conceptual information in a certain context they're not seeing clearly. You change the context, the background of the way they're viewing, and all of a sudden they see it differently. And now they can apply it, right? So metaphor and analogy is a big part of correct motor learning. It is more helpful than getting people to think about specific things about their body. So, language is a big barrier at first. And, with the metronome method, after the pre-postural assessments and things like that, I really go over, the postures that they should maintain throughout every exercise. So okay. I will strictly go over, where your head should be, where your shoulders should be, and I'll keep it simple. Like I'll give them 3 cues. For the most part, I tell people basically at all times during an exercise, you should have your chin as though you're making a double chin. All right. Don't be embarrassed. Make a double chin. Do it on purpose. Take your shoulders, roll them back about an inch down, keep them there. Right. Now kind of tighten your abdomen like you're going to brace for a punch in your stomach, and squeeze your glutes like you're pinching a coin between your butt cheeks. Now, those are the contraction of your abdomen. And there's a neurological thing I won't go into right now, but contracting your abdomen and your glute muscles keeps everything up the kinetic chi properly sequenced, and it ends at the head. So that's why the chin needs to stay back. I've mentioned the bite guard before. Yeah. That does it automatically. If somebody's biting on that thing the whole time, their head will be in the same spot.
Interesting.
And you don't have to worry about that. That's why I love it. I don't have to say, don't move your head anymore, people. I just don't. But keeping your chin tucked in can be a good cue for most people to understand when the exercise should be done, right? It's one of the first things that starts to go. So if you're doing a chest press, if you look online, you can see what I'm talking about. There's a lot of examples of people doing a MedX chest press, and as they're strict and they're slow, and as things are starting to get fatigued, you'll watch their feet start wiggling or something moving around. But the first thing that starts moving is the head. Almost always. It's just been an observation I've made over the years. So in telling people to keep the double chin, it's almost like I tell them, you've locked everything into position from the ground up, and you're going to lock it in place now with this button. Don't let that button come undone.
Interesting.
And so
yeah,
that gives them something in a background to almost be a little frightened of. Like, oh shit, I better not let this button come unlocked. As long as they maintain that, now they have a behavioral attitude at the center of their body that's allowing them to objectively view what's happening with the exercise.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome. Yep. Sorry to stop you there.
That's
yeah,
good.
I think that was a good overview though of pre-programming assessments.
Yeah.
I have to see if I can steal your resources for this. If you have like a list of questions or a list of things you look out for, anything like that, you could send over. I could put in a blog post would be wonderful if you feel like it.
The best resources for that stuff are not myself. I use other people's stuff.
Well, what can you tell us? Maybe top 2 or 3 books or resources for helping with the pre-programming assessments that come to mind?
I think a guy named Eric Cressy, who he's a strength and conditioning coach. He's done a lot of stuff, but he's a baseball guy mainly at this point. He works for the Yankees. But he's a former power lifter. He wrote a former book called Maximum Strength. That's not what I'm recommending, but he's got a lot of materials on his website for athlete assessments.
What's his website?
I think it's just ericcressy.com.
How do you spell that? Do you know?
ERICCREES. Or just Y. One of the two.
Well, I'm sure the listeners can find that. That's all good. No, that's very useful actually. And anything else that comes to mind, let me know. We do need to wrap up though, because I'm mindful of you.
Absolutely.
I know you need to leave. Al, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I think what we need to do is do a part 2 to get the rest of the information about the protocol.
Mhm.
So some really
Yeah.
good stuff here. But yeah, in terms of those listening, if you want to connect with Al on social media, you can go to @automatedmuscle is the account, or automated muscle. And you can learn all about, the Metronome Method and everything else that Al's working on there. But you can also go to his website, automatedmuscle.com, where obviously they can contact you directly there as well. Al, thank you so much for doing this. Sorry, I
Thank
rushed you
you.
on a certain points. Just wanted to make sure
No,
we got to
sorry.
the salient
I
points.
ramble. I know.
You're a good sport. And
Yeah.
for everyone listening, to get the show notes for this episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com and search for episode 466. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. And Al,
Thank
thanks
you,
to you as
Lawrence.
well.
I look forward to next time. Take care, man.
You're very welcome. Take care, Al. Hey, it's Lawrence again. Before you go, I have something special for those looking to accelerate their hit business. Would you like to know how to generate a flood of leads for free? Download our exclusive Build a Referral Machine playbook. It's a concise guide packed with proven strategies from Luke Carlson, CEO of Discover Strength, a fast-growing hit franchise. Clients in our Hit Business membership using these referral tactics have added 20 to 40 new clients, transforming their businesses dramatically. In this playbook, you'll uncover 4 dynamic referral tactics that you can implement right now to drive leads. Plus, when you download the guide, you'll gain access to invaluable resources to expand your business, like ready-to-use sales presentations, a guide for attracting top-notch trainers, a checklist for nailing your sales process, and so much more. And there's a bonus. Subscribe today to ensure you don't miss out on exclusive opportunities like live group calls with hit experts. Plus, you have the chance to contribute questions for our interactive Q&A blog posts and podcasts, where we directly address your queries with industry experts. These special events are scheduled periodically, and as a subscriber, you'll be the first to know when they happen. Just visit highintensitybusiness.com/ref, that's REF, short for referrals, highintensitybusiness.com/ref, or click the link available where you're watching or listening to this. Drop in your email, and you'll get instant access to all these resources today.